Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. Really excited to be here with a fellow Glaswegian business, Gigged.AI and Rich from their organisation, who, rather than me introduce him and his background, I'll hand over to you, Rich. So it'd be great to hear a little bit more about where you came from, how Gigged.AI started, and anything you think's relevant, really.
Sure. Thank you for the invite. I always like being called a Glaswegian. I'm not technical. I'm a Lanarkshire, but I would call myself a Glaswegian to people that don't know the area. Glaswegian sounds better. So my background. I spent 12 years in recruitment. So I worked for a Leaders Group, which is the largest privately owned staffing company in the world, fourth largest overall. I started, very early on in their journey to grow Europe. So I've various roles from recruiter to account director to leading our sales teams to working with some of our largest consultant clients, building new brands, building new product lines, building new offices, all of that over 12 years. Then decided to kind of go a bit of a different route. So took some board positions, one being in the data lab, so helping them grow out their data and AI, new jobs coming into Scotland. So, helping with the PhD program, their master's programs, really trying to create more data science jobs in Scotland. I spent 2.5 years at Gartner, advising CEOs and CIOs on everything, including future work, digital transformation, data strategy, hiring, blockchain, you name it. Since July, have been full time building Gigged.AI, and Gigged.AI is I suppose is a bastard child of all of the experience of myself at being in the traditional staffing, contingent staffing, right? So my background is contingent staffing. I've never placed a permanent person in my life. It's all contingent. From being from technology advisory at Gartner, and then obviously Craig, my co-founder, being a career freelancer, also being a head of IT, trying to hire people, and then our chairman and early investor, John Brody, who built and sold a really successful data science company. So it's like a collection of all of that experience rolled into a startup that really tries to make hiring easier, but tries to use technology, pretty complex technology in places to do that, right? So that's kind of where we're, the roads that have led us to Gigged.AI.
Great. What's it's interesting. So I worked for Randstad for 11 years. So yeah, exactly. We were rivals that we didn't even know. Although I worked for Pareto, who desperately tried not to be Randstad, to be totally honest. But it's interesting. The kind of our business, Willow, was born out of frustration, I think, with recruiting. Would you say Gigged.AI came from a similar sort of place, like from frustration? And if so, what was the frustration that you felt?
I think from Craig's perspective, there would be frustration, right, from being a freelancer and also then trying to hire freelancers. I think he felt it was always a really difficult and painful thing finding a new gig, dealing with recruitment companies, I think, from somebody who's a technologist at heart, I think there was a real frustration at that element. I think for me, it was a little bit different, right? I suffered pretty bad burnout after 12 years just doing it. But I've seen a lot of kids coming through who are 22, 23 coming into recruitment and they're just burning out, right? And the 18-hour days and hustling in the phones and making 40 call outs a day, it's pretty old school, right? And it doesn't really add to the, what with the current crop of people coming into the, into the job market. I kind of look at, if you look at like how Jose Mourinho can't manage modern players, but he could manage them really well 10 years ago. It's similar, right? I think the people coming into the workforce are just different. So for me, it was like, how can we use automation to take some of the bits that people don't like, qualifying jobs, qualifying them well, actually matching and finding people quickly, So for me, it was like, how do we take a lot of those elements and try and use automation to improve it, not get rid of those people, but allow them to do more of the things that they're good at, right? Account management, growing accounts, dealing with disputes, helping people, when automation and tech fails, right? So, really, really, moving that. So for me, it was, I suppose, trying to move, move traditional staffing, into the kind of Web 2 and Web 3 age, right? Because staffing of it feels very still Web 1, right? A lot, job boards,
Oh, yeah.
VMSs, bit integrated. It's still not that, that the business value is still not amazing, right? So for me, it was that frustration of being in the industry and looking about how do we create a better experience for the talent and for the client. Because very few people say, "Oh, I really like I really love dealing with 5 or 6 recruitment companies to find somebody." That's you don't hear that often,
Yeah.
right?
Woohoo!
Yeah, very rarely. Or, you know what, I really love that
Yeah.
PSL. That PSL is great.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been
You
managed really well.
yeah,
It's the perfect PSL.
you don't hear that, or that MSP really changed my life. You don't hear that often, right? And I think
Yeah.
and I think it's trying to move it forward, right? The days of piles of CVs and emails and countless interviews, and the candidates would be pissed off, the recruiters would be pissed off, the clients would everybody would be pissed off, right? Wasn't a good experience for anybody, and you've got so yeah, we were trying to bore out of that, trying to look at trying to really be the future, right? And trying to take a lot of the good stuff from the staffing industry, because there's a lot, right? I spent 12 years on it. You spent 10 years. There's a lot of good, and there's a lot of good things you learn, and there's a lot of good stuff that doesn't get talked about. But there's also a lot of bad stuff, right? And I think pressure and burnout is one of them. So like, how do you deal with that? How do you try and bring that into a into a technology futurist environment, and try and move that forward? So that's kind of where we were coming at it.
It's interesting. And what do you in terms of the recruitment company of the future, you talk about burnout and that kind of stuff. What do you think the recruitment company of the future actually should look like? So
I think it'll be a
automation
lot
is obviously
less.
important, but
I think it'll be a lot less.
yeah. Well, there's 39,000 at the moment. There can't be many more. So
Yeah, I think that. So I think we're in the great decline of that, right? So I think we'll see that 39 grow. I think the bigger ones will continue. Your Decos, your Manpowers, your Randstads, your religious groups, your Hayes, they'll just get bigger, right? I believe that they'll acquire a lot of the up and coming tech companies that are out there, right?
yeah,
I think we'll see a lot more of that in the next couple of years. 100%. But yeah, I think we'll see, again, especially in contingent, I think we'll see a less of a demand on recruitment companies. I think we'll see more talent platforms continue to rise. Obviously, Upwork are the leader, but their revenues still aren't crazy, right? But I think we'll see more platforms grow, and we'll see platforms kind of come into the mainstream. We're already seeing MSPs starting using platforms, which I think is quite a big push,
yeah,
right? Instead of your PSL just being 5 of the biggest agencies, you're seeing quite a few
yeah.
talent platforms working via MSPs now. So that's quite an interesting. That's a very new trend. So I think we'll see more of that.
Yeah.
But as a bit of a geek, I think we'll see more decentralized platforms, right? Web3 actually allowing talent communities, like groups of developers creating their own DAO and working through that approach. I think decentralization is a grenade into traditional recruitment, and I don't think many people have really seen that yet. You've got all this Web3 chatter around crypto, and around the FCA, and around NFTs, and pictures of monkeys smoking cigarettes and all that kind of good stuff. But there is some real. I think that's going to flip everything in its head. I really do, and I think over the next 5 years that will erode the amount of recruitment companies there is. and it will erode some of the margins and contingent. I said permanent's a different market, but I think that's emotive. That's different. But I think that freelance creator economy, I think, is going to explode.
Yeah.
You know, and I
So
think
how long do you think it'll be? And this shows some naivety
well,
before
I think there's some.
companies are paying, paying people through Web3 platforms in, whatever cryptocurrency the individual prefers.
Well, yeah, I think there's a couple of ways, right? I think paying via crypto is one element. I think it's actually just a very small element of it, right? So I think look at Binance. So Binance pay all of their team on crypto, their crypto of choice. But I think that's only a very very small element of it. I think to answer your question, I think it's probably 2 or 3 years we'll start really seeing it, right? You've got we're trying to pioneer this in Europe, right? We're really trying to pioneer the use of AI and the use of blockchain from a talent perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not the only one doing it. You know, you look at Brain Trust in the US who have built their own coin called BTRST that's worth £3. They've got a talent network of 50,000 people already. They've got 120 million of funding from Tiger Global. So, you know, the big funds are investing in it. You know, you've got Gigged.AI that are really doubling down on NFTs, right? So we're starting to see it, and we'll see even more of it. And I think a lot of the contingent staffing companies won't. Some of them will, and they'll acquire and they'll partner. But I think a lot, obviously, will just continue to do things the way we are, and I think we'll see things change. I think the traditional MSP will change. I think if you look at FMSs, which are freelancer management systems, you've got Worksum, you've got Juno, you've got a lot of these coming up. I think technology will definitely really start to erode, and you'll see you and I think both none of these technology companies are perfect. They're still like there's still a mix, but I think we will see when the technology gets widespread, you're being able to incentivize referrals, incentivize loyalty through tokenization, using NFTs for onboarding. I think there's actually instead of having, a database of 5,000 contractors, they're a DAO and they own it. They decide what clients they work with, they decide what agencies they work with, they decide what skills I think the DAO approach could be really interesting for specific talent communities, right? They could have their own Discord groups. They could actually go and win their own projects. They could actually compete with Accenture and Deloitte on deliverables. I think we're just at the start of really seeing we've been talking in the staffing industry for years about disruption, right? Nobody's disrupted it. And we talked about, what's the Uber of recruitment, right? And there isn't one. Or there hasn't been one as yet, but I think this is where we see the intersection we're at now between Web3. I do believe 2-3 years we're really going to see a big change as adoption grows. I could be totally wrong on that prediction, but that's the way I see
it. Yeah, I get it's really interesting. I mean, I know Simon Swan, who's the CEO of founder of Hiring Hub, if you know Hiring Hub, which is obviously a platform that connects smaller recruitment companies to businesses. I guess taking it one step further, if platforms become, more powerful, more enticing to the workers to use and easy to use and to compete against, whoever, then is there any need for the middleman at all? Is it not a case of, do you know what? Platforms are now going to rule the world. Companies are going to grow larger internal recruitment teams, get a platform, and then connect directly to the talent.
Yeah, I think so. I think that there's the other rise there. You mentioned internal. There's the rise of the internal talent marketplaces, right? Something that we've built.
Yeah.
You get companies like Gloat and Fuel 50, who are doing some good things in the States on this. So I think there is an element of companies trying to harness their internal talent more in their different. There's a lot of hidden talent in organisations, right? Both from a permanent perspective, but also from a contract, but also from an SOW and consultancy. Nobody knows who's in and who's not in, right? Because they're under all these different badges and they're in through in through a HP or in through a whatever vendor, but really they're in just doing a job, right, under a different mechanism. So I think there'll be interesting takes on that. But and I think, as I said, I believe there'll still be the need. But I think when it comes to permanent recruitment, I think permanent recruitment being more emotive. I think that's harder to disrupt. There are companies out there, auto.com and stuff, that are trying to disrupt the permanent market. But I think permanent, for me, again, personally, could be that I've never really spent much time in it. But I think it's quite emotive. And I do think we're going to see the biggest rise in freelancing and contracting, especially freelancing, than we've ever seen. Because, I think the latest stat was 56% of Gen Zs will start their first job as a freelancer and not perm.
Really well.
So I think that's a huge step change. Like,
yeah,
I think when you earn, what age are you, Woody?
I'm 34.
Right, so I'm 36, right? So we started around the same time, right? In terms of you would never you would never have considered anything but a permanent job when you took your first job, right? When your first job out of uni or whatever. So I think that's changing, right? I spoke to somebody yesterday. Their daughter's 19, earning $3,000 a month writing content through one of the big platforms while at uni.
Yeah. Well, it's just I think it's kind of partly driven by a digital skills shortage enables people to get both a job and develop their own digital skill that they can sell on Upwork, right? So actually just having that flexibility. The other is the hatred of the man as such, the man. That people don't want to work for big corporate organizations that say you have to be in the office X number of days a week, you have to do X, Y, Z, and therefore why not be a freelancer? So it's a good change in my view, like to have the freedom to work when you want to work and not work when you don't want to work. But the mechanisms, like you say, aren't really ready for that to be 56% of the market.
No,
I would
they're
say.
not yet. They're not, and I think that's what that's part of what we'll see. And I think we will see more staffing companies buy up platforms, and I think we'll see more platforms consolidate. These we're getting approached about acquisitions all the time, and we're a baby, right? We've only been going 9 months, So there's a ton going on in this market, and I think we'll see it all play out. But I do firmly believe the key the key driver is actually the technology advances we're seeing in Web3, and I think that will be the catalyst for it. I said I'm a pretty early protagonist around saying this, right? But because I'm not heard much talk around how Web3 changes staffing. I think that's the catalyst. I think it is. I think if you look at the skill sets even that you need to build Web3 products, they're side giggers, they're freelancers, they're not perm, right? Like you try and hire a blockchain developer perm right now, good luck, right?
Yeah.
If you hire a community manager to hire Discord perm, well, you know what? They're probably managing all 10 communities on the side, freelance, right? So, I think we're, I think we're in a really interesting time coming up. And there's a lot of silos that I think are creating, right? There's a lot of vetting companies, different platforms, different ways to gamify it. There's so many different silos, and I think we'll see a consolidation. As I said, it'll either be some of the bigger platforms really taking over through their massive funding rounds, or we'll see some of the staffing companies really start to make some acquisitions and make some big moves as things change. But there'll also be some of the bigger companies, I believe, that the bigger enterprises that will continue to use things the way they are, right? Because it's bigger organizations are always going to be less risk adverse, right? There's more governance, there's more standards, so that'll keep a lot of the bigger companies going for the next few years. But I think we will then start to see a more of a change, right? More of a different approach to hiring, different mechanisms, gig economy strategies becoming a real thing that companies actually have strategies to ramp up and ramp down. They actually have different mechanisms to onboard, which are, I think you get to the point where you could use technology to search. If I'm an internal recruiter, let's say I work at Barclays, I could have the technology at my fingertips to look, is there anybody internally that can do this job, whether it's contract, perm, consultancy, is there anybody that can do that? Within 20 seconds, look internally, then be able to match into my 3 or 4 talent platform communities and be able to see via the same inputs what I have, options, be able to then hook that up with a hiring manager. Obviously, what you guys do around the videos could be a great play into that, right? So instead of having to do all these interviews and do like 3-4 interviews to hire a contractor, you can see a pre-recorded interview which is tailored to specific projects or specific skill sets. They can make a decision. That person then gets onboarded within minutes because all their identity and all of their information is on an NFT. And then they can come in and they can either be paid in various altcoins or crypto or Great British pounds or dollars, and then be incentivized for referring new talent into that network pool, right? And I think that could become that whole process could be done in an hour, 2 hours. Like we could do that right now in 2 hours. That whole process I just explained. And I firmly believe that's some of the change we'll see for internal recruiters. It's not that they become redundant. It's just that the technology helps make it more efficient to tap into.
We always talk about, it's not about getting rid of recruiters. It's about getting recruiters to spend the right time with the right people. That's the thing. Because, even using a platform and you find the people, you send the shortlist to the hiring manager, there's still a shit ton of stuff to do outside of that.
Exactly.
To make sure they align culturally, you like them, The question I was just going to ask before you move on was, what part do you think peer-to-peer or company-to-platform reviews plays in that? Because I think until anybody can go on G2 and write a review about us as a business. Anybody can go on Glassdoor and write a review about their organization, but the converse is not true. And if you wanted to really, create a quick way of finding people, like a checker trade for tech staff, to be crude, adding that kind of review system would make a huge difference. It could save a huge amount of time, but it could also have a huge risk.
We have that double view review system already, but I think the blockchain actually would allow that to build, right? I think you could actually build on that in a blockchain where that DAO can actually rate the client ratings and actually decide what companies and what projects based on the ratings of your peers. So so I said we've already tested and adopted that approach. I think we'll see more do that. But I think it can even go even further. So no, it's that transparency both ways, right? We're in a I think historically, it was all, the market I grew up on was that like client was king, right? And that has been flipped in its head, but it'll be flipped in its head even more. With remote working, especially as archaic companies continue to say, like, you need to be back in 5 days a week, back in Canary Wharf. I think we'll just see people just go, I'm not doing that, right? And I'm going to go and work via different avenues and be doing interesting different work. So I see it already happening, but we'll see more.
Do they? So, that's the thing is, and what I love about the tech community at the moment is, if they don't think a project is exciting enough for them, they'll find a different project. And that's kind of what your technology is enabling, not only companies to find people quicker, but also people to find things that are of interest to them quicker.
Yeah, totally.
And there's no better tech than somebody that's actually passionate about what the hell you do. So makes a huge difference.
Yeah, no, totally. I think you see that, right? It's about people, the number one reason people don't leave jobs is about money, right? I see some reports that say everybody will leave their job for a 10% pay rise. I don't know if I buy that, right? Maybe in perm, but as I said, let's focus on, you focus on the contingent. It is about exciting, varied work, right? We've got clients who could work for a multinational bank for a couple of weeks, and then the next week they're working with a, AI driven, solution for cancer, right? So it's like that's that kind of varied project work, varied, and that makes you better as well. The more different projects, the more different people you work with, you get better.
Yeah.
So I think I think it's a really interesting model.
Yeah. Awesome. So I guess switching gears slightly, maybe drawing on your past experience as a recruiter or in the recruitment industry, and pulling that into the kind of technology and the knowledge that you have. If you were now an organization and you were starting to build your sort of ideal tech stack that would help you, deliver right now in the challenge that we're having in the war on talent, what kind of things would you say would go into the recipe? What would be the most important things that helps you, generate employer branding, assess the right candidates, and then ultimately, select and onboard people?
So I would focus on trying to split it out as well, right? So I think different strategies for different things, right? So building a permanent core team is important in certain areas, but then being able to have a kind of flex style approach that you can ramp up and ramp down as business demand or projects decide. So I think having different strategies for different things, I think one size fits all doesn't work.
Yeah.
There's different things. I think when it comes to a tech stack as well, I think never start with tech, right? Always start with what's the problem you're trying to solve, right? That's the Gartner advisor in me, right? What's the business challenge? What's the biggest headache the CEO has, and what are we trying to solve here? Is it we're trying to build new products that drive new digital revenue? Is it we're trying to save cost? Are we trying to reduce risk? What is the overall business driver? Always start there. And then starting small, right? So instead of building a full, suite of products and suppliers and, trying to build the end-to-end solution straight away, go, right, where's some quick wins? I think what you said, employer branding is one that I'd never really thought about much in traditional staffing, right? We had EVPs, which were employee value propositions, but it's very old school, right? So, why does someone work here? I think that's important, but I think an EVP written down in a Word document that you email out to people, we're probably beyond that now. But I think sharing stories of people who, their experience of returning to work, flexible work, I think that getting that employer branding on point is really important. It's something that we built that in from day one as a company. I know you guys do too. We've tried to be really focused on wellness, sustainability, flexibility, and we try and tell that story regularly, whether it's through myself sharing some of my experiences, sharing some of our team. Anybody we hire comes to us, right? We people reach out to us all the time. We meet them proactively, and if we, and that helps us. So that branding that we put out on LinkedIn regularly isn't us trying to sell to clients per se. It's us trying to create that employer branding proactively, so people see us before they're looking for a job and go, that's an environment I would like to work on. That helps massively. The other thing I think, like I said, I think harnessing internal talent is something that most companies haven't figured out yet, and I think that's a big trend. It's one I'm really passionate about. Around and for me it comes from I worked on big projects with RBS, and we had hundreds of people, right? And there's various projects, and I remember there was a project called the Amstelveen Data Center Excellence, and I remember the PMO at the time saying we need 4 server engineers, and I was like, well, how do you know what server engineers you've got? And pulled up 5 spreadsheets of 5 projects, and it was hundreds of names, and it'd be their name and their skill set, their day rate, and the company they were in through. Now, I thought that approach isn't still used. That approach is still used in most large scale digital projects, right? It's just big. So how can you match? How can you look internally? You can't. So I think harnessing internal talent is going to be huge around, you hiring costs are continuing to go up. So if you can retain one person, or redeploy them elsewhere instead of them leaving the organization. Now, your managers all need to have a bit more of a holistic approach there. That's a different problem, maybe for a different day. But I think internal talent, and then I think it's a blended approach, right? I think it's then, who's good at traditional contract? What companies can I use? Paul Estes talks about having a gig strategy, right? What are some of the gig platforms that we can use and have an easy way to focus if we've got short, sharp demand? Who are some, and then what are some of the other technologies that we can use to help, to help vet, right? Willow, Searchlight, there's lots of eightfold AI. There's lots of different tech out there that could help do different things, vet people, interview better. There's lots of different ways. So, but yeah, I think always starting with the business problem you're trying to solve, and not just focusing on let's throw a lot of tech at it and let's build lots of different cool AI companies and let's just build because at the end of the day, all these companies, yes, they're tech stacks and they're tech solutions, but they're still suppliers. So your procurement department are going to hate you because you've just brought in another 12 different people for procurement to deal with, terms to review, payment terms to review, invoices to
adoption. You got 10 bits of tech to get all of your users to use.
Absolutely. And that's kind of what we're trying to do from our ecosystem approach, right? Try and have that end-to-end internal and external talent marketplace, and then tap in lots of really good partnerships, right? Willow being one of them, Stripe being one of them, Kudos, right? Try and plug in to that ecosystem. So it might not be a direct supplier to that customer. It's through that kind of entry point, and that's really our vision, right? It's strong partnerships, strong technology, but really just trying to make the life easier for the person trying to hire, and also never forgetting the person trying to do the work, right? And reducing the barriers for them.
Well, wouldn't it be amazing if one day we're in a position where all the companies in the world, the internal talent that is frustrated, can say that they're frustrated with their job without having to hand in their notice, and then, oh well, we better find you something else or give you a 10% pay rise.
Yeah,
that's the internal discussion is always, we haven't got the people until we've realised that this person is now handing their notice in to do the job that we have available in, part B of our business. But the manager wasn't willing to let them voice those frustrations, wouldn't let them out of the role that they're in, because then they've got to fill the role, right? So I do think that is it's a twofold issue. One is visibility of the actual talents of the people that you've got, definitely, but the other is around people management and just culture of giving people the flexibility to say, do you know what, this job is now not fulfilling me in the slightest. Thank you for paying me a lot of money, but is there something else I can do? And I managed to do that at Pareto, change jobs, all of that kind of stuff, because I was lucky that I had a few good managers, but not that many people are that lucky, really.
Yeah, exactly. No, I totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree. From that cultural perspective doesn't change. A bad culture is still going to struggle to retain and recruit the right people.
Yeah, I do feel like the non-heritage businesses now are starting to have their culture built kind of bottom up, which is kind of the right way. People meet in the middle, whereas your big traditional businesses, it's still this is our culture, but nobody behaves like it. So it's an interesting struggle. So I think you've probably given us your 3 bits of wisdom, Rich, when it comes to advice. But is there any other advice that you'd give to internal recruiters in this market or preparing for the future market?
So I think definitely start looking at what I said all good internal recruiters do this anyway, but looking at what are some of the key skill sets that are coming down the line, right? I think that future planning. So I said we're going to see the explosion of Web3 skills, right? I've wrote a lot about this, but smart contract developers, Solidity developers, same thing, blockchain developers, product owners, architects, all with, we're seeing mass scale adoption of blockchain, right? Adidas, Barclays, Nike, so I think being able to look at what are the skills that are really going to be in demand, and then where are the places and what are the channels, and having and being able to get ahead of the game instead of just waiting for the business to demand it and say it's a perm role and then just start advertising it the same old way. I think that being able to future proof and go, look, these skill sets are going to be the most in demand skill sets. They're not going to be traditional permies. They're not going to be traditional contractors even. So how do you engage with them? What are the companies and mechanisms they use? How do you start building some of those relationships and getting feedback and ideas from that? Because I think that traditional perm contract is not going to be the way to go for that. Not forgetting about the brand awareness stuff, right? I think the days is just, hey, another job for John Smith at John Smith's team at ABC, great opportunity, and then 3 of the people comment, great opportunity. How many people apply to those jobs? I don't have his stats, but I would love to see, right? I bet there's none. So I think that element, and as I said, being able to build the right mechanisms to make sure that you're not, the first port of call isn't let's hire externally, when actually there's an amazing untapped workforce that you've already got and you're already paying. You're just not utilizing it right. I think there's a massive opportunity there that's just
that you're about to lose if you don't use it.
Exactly. Exactly. So I think that'll be a huge element.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time and joining us on the podcast. If anybody wants to get in touch with you or anybody at Gigged.AI, how should they get in touch? What's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, if you want to use the platform, just go on to Gigged.AI, sign in, create a profile, go through the process. I'm in LinkedIn every day, right? So connect with me on LinkedIn. Send me a note if you want to have a chat. As I said, I'm always happy to help in any way I can. But yeah, LinkedIn's where to find me. I don't do Twitter because I'd be too addicted to it. But LinkedIn's my base.
Yeah, Twitter's like golf for me. Like 90% of my shots are terrible, and then you do one tweet that looks good, people like, and then you're like, right, I better keep going with this.
Yeah.
But in reality,
no, I decided for the good of my mental health, I'm like, I'm going to use one platform only, and I'm just going to use that, and and I think that's probably a good life when it comes to technology as well. All the technology, so let's use one and use it well, and double down on it, and don't because I was on everything at one point, and then I was like, nah, I can't.
It's too much.
You get addicted to it as well, right? I've really got addicted personality, so I'm like just always on, screen for one time. You're like, I've been on my screen for like 14 hours today. That's like,
yeah.
That's not good for anybody.
Yeah. I had an average screen time of 10 hours the other week. I was like, oh my Lord, something needs to change here. But yeah, great. Okay, so LinkedIn, and obviously sign up for the platform.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
If you're interested.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks very much, Rich.
Yeah, no problem. Good talking to you.